think there were four reasons really. The first, the passage of time, where they talk about time being a great healer. It certainly doesn't cure everything, but it does create a distance. And so in the initial phases, after you've lost someone, everything feels far too raw and far too acute. But as time passes, you do become less connected to those feelings. And it's a strange thing in modern society that we tend to feel embarrassed or ashamed about feelings that are very strong. So that passage of time has allowed me to feel I can now own and let it belong to me. So that was probably the first one. The second was my professional life, that I didn't want my personal life to be entwined with my professional life, particularly because not only I, but both of us had worked in developing that professional area of work. So, well, now once again I'm mostly retired from that. It's easier to do it. The need to spread awareness, I think. Quite by chance, people have occasionally asked about the book, and when I've shared it with them, they've said other people ought to be able to read it. That because it's written from someone who's in the process, rather than someone commissioning a report and writing objectively about the process of grief, it gives a completely different picture, and that picture shows where the shortcomings possibly are in end-of-life care and in support for the bereaved. So those would be the main things. I thought I was. I am having, as part of my master's degree, done a module on senescence and aging and grieving, particularly the wonderful work of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I thought intellectually I did understand what I would need to expect, and that therefore things like counselling wouldn't be particularly helpful because I already knew what those feelings were about. So that was one thing, and then I had also experienced two losses quite early in my adult life, my mother when I was 21 and my father when I was 38. And I already knew that the process is different each and every time, that death has an extraordinary capacity to surprise us. It's never what you expect. So I thought that had helped to provide a background. The fact that my husband was many years older, there was a big age gap, and so we had always known that the probability was that he would go first. And so that for many years had been a sort of background theme. And then, because he had such an awful last 18 months, like many families who are in that stage of watching someone suffer, part of you wants that suffering to end and the other part dreads it. So those three things had made me feel I somehow, on firmer ground than I probably was. But what I didn't expect was the enormity of the absence that is left behind. I describe it as being like an amputation because that's what it feels like. And I didn't expect the shift that takes place in social relationships. That when you've been together with someone for quite a long time, or you've worked together in a partnership, you are seen as a unit. And when half that unit is no longer there, you are perceived very differently. And quite bizarrely, I didn't feel like a widow, and I didn't want to be seen as a widow. I didn't want to be this poor, pathetic thing. But you become socially untidy. People are embarrassed, I think. They're uncomfortable. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. And so they unwittingly avoid you, and you find you are no longer included in the things that have been a part of your normal life. So there are two facets, I would say, to loss. One is the loss of the person, and the other is the loss of the way of life that you had, in my case, for 26 years, so for quite a long period of time. And those two parts now I was not ready for. lost someone who you've had a very close emotional and or intellectual relationship with, and we were lucky enough to have both, the only person who could understand what their loss means to you is them. And they are the one that isn't there. So even your own family, who, you know, my sons and daughter loved him very much and missed him, the nature of their missing is different from yours because it's unique to each and every relationship. So the only one I wanted to tell was him. And it was a few weeks after he died. I used to sit down with my glass of wine and my meal in the evening. And after a while I thought, I'm going to start writing to you. It's a way of me being able to express in a way that I couldn't to anyone else what now is like. So it was quite simple, really. Initially, all you think about is what you've lost, and you seek it everywhere. I think in physical things, in photographs, in the smell of things, in stories that you used to share and you continue to try and share with those who knew them. And that's an essential part of the process, but it doesn't help you to heal. And there comes a time, and I think the time is different for everyone, where gradually some of those things that you seek externally become internalized. I describe them as being embodied, really. They become part of you, sort of physically and emotionally. And there is no longer the same need to look outside and find nothing is there, because you find what you're looking for is still there, but it's different. And in that way, it's not that you heal and forget, it's that you heal and you take what was best forward with you, I think, or at least that was my experience. When you or someone you love is very ill or near the end, what you would like to believe is that there will be people around who can care for you, who can give you pain relief, who can make you comfortable and ease the passage of whatever is going to happen. And in order to do that, you will have adequate support at hand. Now, I know our experience was not necessarily representative of everyone else's, but it wasn't a good one. And although the National Health Service plays lip service to palliative care, our experience was of a system that is reactive rather than proactive, that there was absolutely no coordination of care in the community whatsoever. And to give you an example of how it sort of played out, we had, was it 16, or the other way around? I think it was 16 emergency ambulance admissions in an 18-month period into hospital. Because every time something went wrong, it went from being chronic to acute to a crisis in a very short period of time, sometimes an hour. And there wasn't time to ring district nurse services, sometimes it was a weekend, and the process of dying is not a 9 to 5, 5-day-a-week process. It needs people available at all times, really. So that difference between needing a proactive service that monitored, reviewed, had regular visits, had things in place, versus the reactive service, which was that you had to request everything, and quite often when it came it was too late, was one of the major issues that we experienced. There should have been a community matron who was in charge of coordination. She was off on maternity leave or something for 6 months, and we happened to fall within that period. So nobody coordinated GP, district nursing services, social services, and so on. The delay in receiving a reply to requests, sometimes if you rang district nurses and it was at a handover time, they wouldn't ring back for 2 or 3 hours. that's too long if you have a blocked catheter. You can't wait that long. One example some years earlier was it took 14 weeks for the rapid response pain relief team to contact us. 14 weeks when you are in severe pain is certainly not good enough. And what has become forgotten by the modern system, whether it's shortage of money, whether it's lack of resources or whatever, is that when there is anxiety, when there is fear, pain is exacerbated and recovery, if the recovery is possible, is delayed. That those psychological factors play into how the physical deterioration is or isn't taking place. So as far as the sort of coordination of services is concerned, if we went back 50 years or so, every hospital used to have what was called a hospital almoner. And the almoner's role was to go and assess a patient at the time of discharge, see whether they needed to go into a convalescent home, which were available in those days. They were a very good idea. Or what support was needed in terms of district nurses, home helps, and so on. And that role was taken over by, I just need to look up exactly what it was taken over, by what are called care coordinators these days. So people still get assessed. And that should go through to the GP, the local nurse, or the social worker. But the trouble is that those services are not necessarily joined up once there is a discharge. And often there's a delay so that you can be discharged on a Friday morning and the GP doesn't receive the information until Tuesday morning. So you've had 3 or 4 days without any support whatsoever with someone who is quite seriously ill. So that sort of lack of joined up services, the fact that incurable illnesses, often those illnesses are multifactorial, so that one specialist department is not dealing with that illness or that person alone, but there isn't a connection between those departments even within the same hospital. So after Peter died, I wrote up some of the issues that we had experienced, not as a complaint, but because I wanted to make things better in the future. And I suggested that what every hospital needed was on their electronic notes a human body at the top of each page with all the organ systems shown, and if a patient was being treated by urology, then the kidney would light up, or the bladder. If they were being treated by cardiology, then the heart would light up, so that if a patient was going from one department to another, the consultant could immediately see who else in that hospital was actually treating that patient as well. I don't think it's happened yet, and that was 12 years ago. But what tended to happen was after each admission, you have to be reassessed as from the beginning again. So you might have had a care package when you were discharged. Somebody might have to go in for an emergency admission, only be in for 24 hours, but you've lost that care package when they come home. They have to be completely reassessed. You'll have a new team sometimes of carers coming in for 2 weeks, which is the emergency care, and then they have to be reassessed again for the ongoing care. So you can imagine 16 admissions in 18 months, how many reassessments, how much time is wasted, how much money is wasted, but more importantly, how there's no continuity of care for the patient or the family. So that was a major issue, plus the fact that families are not sufficiently, adequately informed about what is available to help. So one of the wonderful services that is available are the Marie Curie nurses. And Marie Curie nurses, they are free at the point of care, they're specialised in end-of-life care, and they provide tailored support in the home, including night visits so that you can sleep if you're one of the carers. We were repeatedly told that the end was some time off, so I didn't request that until 10 days before he went into the hospice. So I only had 3 overnight helps, really. And had I known, I would have asked weeks before. And they were helpful not just in allowing me to have a good night's sleep, but 2 of them actually supported me in saying, this cannot continue, he needs to go into a hospice. Whereas the GP didn't recognise that because he only saw him when he was asked to come in for a particular issue, and he was able to rally to be sociable when he saw his doctor, and so he appeared to be much better than he actually was. So that whole process of knowing what's available, that the duration, and being able to predict when end of life is going to come is also incredibly difficult. It can look as if it's months away, but equally it can be days away, and the system is not set up to really provide the support that's needed if it comes unexpectedly. It's there to diagnose, treat and discharge, and once discharged you cease to exist until you once again request that you need some help. And that the terminally ill just don't fit into this system of needing regular monitoring, review and flexible care, and I would say those were the things that needed to become hallmarks of, I think the palliative care system does it, but there's a gap between hospital care, GP services and actually having the access to palliative care.